today we're going to be making some potato leek soup. I harvested the last of the garden the other day. I got out my cold hardy crops such as my leeks, which are right here, and then carrots and beets. And then before then the weekend before, we had harvested the rest of our potatoes, which are all stored up in here. So I separated out, these are all the potatoes that got damaged while we were harvesting. We cut them with the shovel or the hoe when we were digging them up. So anything that has little ouchies on it, those need to be used up very quickly, otherwise they're going to spoil. I've already had a few spoil and I've had to compost some of them. So my goal is to use as much of that as I can in this bulk potato leek soup. So I did do really well with the leeks. This is my first year ever growing leeks, and I will definitely be doing that in the future. They were super easy. I started them at the same time I started my onion seedlings. And the onion seedlings, I got some onions, but they were really small. I'm still trying to work that out. But next year I'll definitely be doing onion sets as well as seeds. I'm gonna continue to keep trying. But I did the same thing with the leeks, and I just put them in the ground, and they were really nice. They worked out really well. So something that I'll definitely do in the future. And then they're ready around when potatoes are ready, and it's a perfect way to use up a bunch of potatoes and get them stored up for the winter. The first thing I'm gonna do is get these leeks chopped up, washed, and use the tops. I have seen a lot of people say to dehydrate them and make them into a dehydrated leek powder, so you can add that to soups and stews or whatever you're cooking. So I'm gonna probably try that. I'm gonna see how far I get. But there's a lot of dirt that gets stuck in the leeks here, so we got to get those washed up and trimmed. Let's get started. So leeks will stay good in your refrigerator for about a week, so they won't last very long in there, which is why we need to do something with them. So they've been in there for a few days now, so that's why I really need to get these started. It is cool in the pantry, but so basically I'm going to take off the layers. They have layers just like onions. They're in the allium family, just like onions and garlic. And so we're gonna peel them back, and then that's the nice part there that you see. So that's all like maybe the more dirty or dried out parts. Just rip those off. And of course we're gonna cut off the very end to take off all this root. And we're gonna use, for my soup, we can use, the whole entire plant is edible, but we're gonna use it up to here, and we're gonna just thinly slice it, and then we're gonna wash it because a lot of dirt can get stuck in between these layers because of the way they grow in the garden. So I'm gonna cut them, and then I'm gonna rinse them, and then we'll use them for our soup. And then the top parts here, I'm gonna chop those up, and I'm gonna hopefully get those on my dehydrator rack to make green leek powder. So as you can see, a bunch of dirt just fell out of it. That's why these have a lot of dirt on them, but that's okay. So I'm gonna put this aside to wash these before I dehydrate them. And then this is the part we're gonna use for our soup, which still has a lot of dirt in there. So that's why I'm gonna put this aside, get them all ready, and then I'm gonna slice them and then wash out all the dirt. So I've decided I'm going to be a little more selective about the greens that I'm going to dehydrate, since I'm using about this much for the potato leek soup. I'm not going to use this really like far up here. You could, but I think I'm just going to use this, like this section here, because I just tasted it and it's just way more flavorful, this part right here. So I'm not going to bother with these. Some of these are kind of yellow and papery anyway, so I think we'll just use the nice green part down here. gonna compost this part, and I'm gonna keep this part to wash and then dehydrate. They're all done getting trimmed up. This is probably how you would find them in your grocery store at this point. Oh yes, and a side note, this made quite a big mess. I have all the compost down there. These are all the nice greens I'm going to rinse and then put in my dehydrator. Are you eating them? Yeah. It doesn't taste very good. It's kind of like an onion, huh? Sailor's eating the leeks. Sailor's trying to eat the leeks. Yeah, look at that. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and start slicing them into about 1/4 inch slices. See, you see all that dirt? That's all the dirt that got stuck in the layers because it's growing in the garden in the dirt, you know, and it puts on layers each time. So that's why we're gonna slice them and then wash them after they're sliced. Okay, I'm done slicing all the leeks, so now we need to go and wash off all of the dirt and debris. I'm gonna wash all the dirt off of here as much as we can, and hopefully most of it will go to the bottom of the bowl here. Okay, so these are the greens I'm going to be dehydrating. So I just got them all washed up, and now I'm going to cut them into just smaller pieces to get them on the dehydrator. So here I am just setting the dehydrator for 12 hours at 120 degrees, and here they are the next morning, and they should be very dry and brittle and crack easily between your fingers. Then I used a high-powered blender to grind it down to a powder. Now back to the soup. I continued to chop the vegetables, and I was able to actually harvest some fresh thyme and sage from the garden even under all the snow. That made a lovely addition to the soup. And you can find the detailed printable instructions for this freezer-friendly soup recipe and the green leek powder on the blog handsandfeethomestead.com, and I will link them in the description box below. So now fast forward a few days to when I made a canning version of the potato leek soup. It turned out great, so I'd love to take you with me through that process. Hey everybody, today I'm going to take you with me as I can up some potato leek soup. We harvested our leeks and our potatoes the other week, and I made a whole big batch of just potato leek soup that I froze in little bags, but I wanted to do a canning recipe with it. I had some left from that. So I'm going to use my leeks here. I have potatoes, some broth. I'm using chicken broth, homemade stock, some onion, and some garlic for this recipe. So I'll link down below the recipe that I'm using. This is not my own recipe. It is a canning recipe that's been tested and proved to be safe. So I will link it down below if you're interested in doing this for yourself, but I just thought I would take you along as we do this today. This is not a how-to can beginner tutorial. There are so many great videos out there. That's how I learned to can. So if you're very, very new to pressure canning, I would go and check out some videos on some good channels out there and teach you the basics. I already have my leeks sliced up here, you want them to be sliced about a ½ inch thick. This is 7 cups of leeks. I'm planning to do 7 quarts. That's what the recipe calls for. It says 7 cups of sliced leeks and then 7 cups of cubed potatoes. Are you practicing your letters?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're gonna need 7 cups of cubed potatoes and some onion and garlic. Again, I'll link to the recipe below so you know the exact amounts of everything. One thing I'm gonna say is I am using my own homemade chicken stock here, so it is very gelatinous. And the recipe calls for 21 cups of broth, which this is not 21 cups. So because it's so concentrated, I am going to water it down for this recipe when I heat it up. Also, to note, since you are not supposed to be canning fat, when you make homemade broth, you're going to have this fat layer on top. So I'm going to make sure that I just remove all of that. I'm going to either strain it or just take that little fat layer out that hardens on top, because this was in the fridge, so all the fat just came to the top. So I'll just remove that and then we can dump it into the pot and get it warmed up. So I'm going to get started getting things ready here and I'll just take you along with me. Okay, so I just skimmed off the fat, the big chunks of it, and then I'm just going to run it through my strainer here. I have my strained broth. Now I'm going to just fill it up with some water just to water it down a little bit because it's really concentrated when I made it. So I'm going to just go ahead and do that. I'm just going to get this into my pot here because I'm going to want it to be a hot liquid when I add it to the jars. Okay, well that is warming up on the stove. I'm going to get my onions cut up and my garlic. It calls for 1 3/4 cups of onions and then also 7 teaspoons of minced garlic. So we're gonna dice the onions and mince the garlic, and then we're gonna get our potatoes prepped and ready. About perfect. Okay, so 1 onion was about 1 3/4 cups of diced it. Okay, we have the onion here. Okay. Now I'm going to work on getting some 7 teaspoons of garlic, minced garlic. Okay, so I have my garlic all minced here. So I do have my pressure canner here. This is a Presto pressure canner. There's also the All-American that holds a lot more, but this has worked really well for me. So I'm going to get the water. I have about 2 inches of water put in here, and I'm going to get this and get it heating up. And then I'm also going to put my clean jars. I have 7 wide mouth quart jars here, and then I have my lids and everything all washed with hot soapy water. I'm going to put my jars into my canner here, and I'm going to turn the heat on, and I will let my jars get warmed up along with the water. That is cold water that I put in there, so it will gradually heat up with the jars, and I will let it do that while it helps to put a little bit of water in the bottom of the quart jars so that they don't fall over. Okay, while that's heating up, I'm going to go ahead and get my potatoes peeled and then cut into 1/2-inch cubes. So I'm cutting my pieces into about that size there. And then I'm gonna throw it in some cold water so that I can get this finished up without it getting brown. Hi. Are you gonna help me? Do you have your potatoes? Can you hand me a potato? Oh. Thank you, big helper. Good job. Wanna give me another one? Alright. Thank you, Sayla. Thank you. Okay, so I'm done dicing my potatoes. I have them here in some cold water. I have my onions ready and my leeks and my minced garlic. It came to a boil and then I lowered it down to a simmer. So that'll be nice and hot when we put them into the jars. It's been simmering for a little while, so it's nice and hot. The jars are hot. So I'm going to be doing a raw pack as far as the ingredients go. So I'm going to be taking my canning jars here, putting in my ingredients and then topping it with broth. And I'm going to be leaving a 1-inch headspace in the jar. The side note here, this is about 5 pounds of potatoes. So the recipe says to use 7 cups of diced potatoes and 7 cups of sliced leeks, and that's going to be for 7 quart jars. Now, obviously that's about 2 cups per quart jar, and a quart jar is 4 cups, so that is going to only be about halfway full of ingredients. So the recipe does say that you can add more potatoes, more leeks to fill up the jar more, and then you'll need less broth, obviously. So you can add more if you're looking at that recipe. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fill up my jars as much as I can. And then as long as you leave an inch of headspace at the top. So I'm going to get my jars out of the canner and start getting them packed up with the ingredients here. Now we're going to take our chicken stock that we've had simmering on the stove. We brought it to a boil and then down to a simmer, and then I just kind of turn the heat off so it's just nice and hot. It doesn't need to be boiling when you put it in it. So I'm just going to go ahead and ladle the chicken broth into my jars. I don't know where my little headspace measurer, whatever that's called, is that comes with your canning kits, but an inch headspace would be down to right about there, right about that line. So that's about right there. That was like almost right on the money there. Just enough to fill my jars here. So this was about 20 cups I had of broth here. The recipe calls for 21 cups of broth, and it's talking about using less vegetables than I'm using. So long story short, to save you some trouble if you try this, I would say to have extra broth on hand if you're following their amounts for their vegetables, because if you did it exactly as they said, you would not have enough broth with 21 cups, because I have more vegetables packed in here, and I had about 20 cups, and that was just the perfect amount for these jars. Just a FYI for when you're planning. I don't know, it's one of the most annoying things to me about canning is just trying to plan the amounts of everything that you need. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Alright. I'm going to wipe them all down first with just a dry cloth here. And then I'm going to take a little bit of white vinegar and get a towel wet with that and just wipe the rim with the white vinegar napkin, because that will actually help the canning jar, or the canning lid, to seal better. Or not better, but sometimes if it's too greasy on the top, like the chicken broth gets on it, then it might not seal. So the vinegar helps get rid of that issue there. Okay, I'm gonna get a little vinegar on there. Okay, so I have my lids here and my rings, and so today I'm going to be using 2 normal lids with rings, your average normal ones that you would see, and for 5 of them I'm going to use these Tatler lids, which are reusable canning lids. And yes, I know you can reuse the normal ones, even though they say you're not supposed to, but you definitely can, and I have done that. But these are the Tatler lids that are just supposed to last pretty much forever, as long as you don't damage the rubber gasket on it. So I've used those before and they've held up really well so far. Now with the Tatler lids, there is a little bit of a learning curve with them. You don't want to over tighten your rings onto these Tatler lids. So I go like this tight, just how it is turning, and then just a little bit further, but not much further. You don't want it to fall off while it's processing, but just like that, and then just kind of go just a little bit further than that, because it needs to vent while it is processing, and so if you put it on way too tight, it is not going to seal. But once you get that figured out, these work really well. Right, we have all the lids on, and now it's time to get them into the pressure canner. Okay, so now I'm just gonna let this heat up, and I'm keeping the jiggler off of it for right now. This is the jiggler. Once you see a good amount of steam blowing out of here, you start a clock for 10 minutes, and you let it vent steam for that amount of time. And then when that's done, you can put your jiggler on top, which will allow your pressure to start building in the pressure canner. You need to make sure you check your guidelines for your altitude and make adjustments for that, and make sure you look in your bulk canning book for information on how to decide how many pounds of pressure you need it to be. Or if you're water bath canning something, not this, don't water bath can this, you need to pressure can this. But with water bath canning, you need to adjust the amount of processing time based on your altitude. But for pressure canning, you need to adjust the pounds of pressure. So for my altitude here, where I'm at, I'm going to be doing 12 pounds of pressure. So the steam is starting to come out, if you can see that. So that's what you want to see, and you want that to go for 10 minutes before we put the jiggler back on. Okay, 10 minutes is up. I'm gonna put that on there. And now I'm going to be processing the quartz for 40 minutes at 12 pounds of pressure. So you want to start your count once it gets up to the pounds per pressure. Mine's going to be 12 pounds per pressure, and that's when I'll start the count for 40 minutes. Okay, so mine is just above 12. I just lowered the heat down a little bit, so I'm going to watch it and make sure it stays right around 12 and not let it dip below the 12 for the whole 40 minutes. And I started my timer. If you were doing pint jars, it would be 35 minutes. Once your timer goes off, just turn off the heat and then let your pressure return to 0 naturally. Wait a couple minutes longer, and then you can take off the weight. Then you can take off the canner lid, but you need to wait 10 minutes before you remove the jars. Now when you're using the Tatler lids, you need to make sure that right when you take them out of the canner, you quickly tighten them. That's what you can see me doing here. This needs to be done in order to get them to seal. Let them sit there and cool down completely, and then you can store them in your pantry. I usually let mine sit for about 24 hours. Okay, so it's the next day now. We got all 7 jars done here. All of the lids have sealed. The good way to test your Tatler lids here to make sure they got a good seal is to lift them up by the lid, and if they don't fall off, they are good. So they are all good. They've all sealed. Very pleased with that. And yeah, I took the rings off. They're gonna get ready to go into our pantry. And yeah, I'm just really excited to have 7 ready to go quarts of potato leek soup. So yeah, I'm so happy I got this little canning project done. I hope to do some more canning projects in the future. I've been really wanting to try canning up some beef stew. So maybe we'll do that on a future video. Alright, well thank you so much for coming along today. We will see you in the next video. Take care and God bless.